Hey there, this is Pam Perry, and we are actually doing, let me delete this off of LinkedIn. So, we're actually going to be doing this. That's why I had that. Uh, we're doing a live today with Omar L. Harris. You see his banner down there. And he is what we call a Jedi, right? He's a Jedi leader, and his book is the Jedi Leader's Playbook. So, we're going to go on live on Amazon and on Speakers Magazine TV because he is a speaker. And we're going to be talking about leadership and diversity, equity, and inclusion, but he actually calls it Jedi justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion. And a little bit about Omar. He is from hailing from Charlotte, and he is um, actually launching a 6 city tour, I believe, 2024 internationally. And so we're going to be talking a little bit about what he has coming up with that. But he's a coach, consultant, a leader. He does all of the things in the realm. He's uh, graduated from HBCU, one of the famous ones, Florida A&M, and that doesn't have anything to do with anything. I just put that in there just because I like Florida A&M. A lot of people that go to that school are really, really, they do so well. I don't know anyone who went to that school that is not doing extremely well. A lady by the name of Erin Simone went there, a friend of mine, and then also Melissa Butler from the Lip Bar. She went there as well. So anyway, he'll probably give us a little bit of background about what that experience was like. But what we'll do right after this is bring him up and we'll talk about the book. Actually, has more than one book. He has several books, and these books are like no. I mean, we're talking about like a real book. Okay, we're talking like a really thick book here, and it is really really good. So right after this, I'm going to bring him up, and then we're going to talk a little bit about justice, equity, and inclusion. It didn't just become a buzzword. Think in 2020, right? This was something that definitely for uh, part of Omar's, I guess you would say, part of his makeup of his leadership. So, right after this, we'll bring Omar L. Harris up. All right. So, there we got Omar L. Harris. How are you? So,
Hello, Dr. Pam. How are you doing?
good, good. So I have one of the books, the Jedi Leaders Playbook, and you've written several other ones as well. We're streaming on Amazon Live, so people can actually click and buy the other ones as well. But we've got the one, the Servant Leaders Manifesto. We also have one called Leading Change. So kind of give us a little bit of background before we kind of get into the books about why these books, why leadership, and the type of background that you have. And I want people to
hmm
understand too, because you have had such a background in terms of international travel and also
hmm
international teams.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I spent 20 years in the global pharmaceutical industry, starting in '98, working with companies like Pfizer, Schering-Plough, Merck, GlaxoSmithKline, and Allergan over the course of my career, all over the world. So from the U.S. to Brazil to the Middle East and to Asia during this career as I moved through sales to marketing to business operations to general management. And I was always fascinated by leadership, Pam. I remember being an associate product manager, and my manager had a library behind his desk where you could like check out books, leadership books.
Hmm.
And I started reading those books when I was like 24, 25 years old and getting really like enthralled by the idea of what a leader can do for people when you really take it seriously and when you really take it as a vocation, not just as a title. And
Hmm.
so I kind of took that very seriously. So when I first got my first team back in 2006, I had all these ideas from all these leadership experts that I had been reading that I wanted to implement. And I realized over the course of, let's say, 10 years of leading teams from 2006 to 2016, that I was going to have to innovate my own principles to actually bridge the gap between theoretical advice and practical implementation.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I wrote my first book, Leaderboard: The DNA of High Performance Teams, because I wanted to help people understand. Listen, these books have sold millions of copies, but millions of leaders are not emulating the advice because it's much harder to do what they say they want to do versus just follow their advice in terms of like just the superficial aspect of what they're advising. If you want to actually be a leader who implements things the way some of these luminaries say, it's going to be a lot harder. And I wanted to make that easier for other leaders following me, and also provide kind of like a scientific justification for how leaders can accelerate the process for teams from forming to performing. There's a
So
science
some,
behind it. Yeah,
mhm. So some of the leaders that leadership books I think you probably have followed. Obviously John Maxwell. He's always like
yeah,
talking
yeah,
about leadership.
yeah,
Robert F. Smith, that is
yeah,
one as well. I know Robert F. Smith. That's the African American millionaire.
yeah. The
Yeah,
billionaire. Yeah,
billionaire, right?
yeah,
Multiple millionaire, billionaire.
yeah.
So what? So in terms of his leadership style, just looking at like say the difference between say Everett Taylor, Robert Smith, and say John Maxwell, and then kind of like a mashup of John Canfield in there. So kind of give us the
Right.
mashup of how you study them, and then what the Jedi leadership, I guess you would say, your principles, what that entails.
Exactly. So I think that some of the other authors you mentioned just are, they depend on who your guru is, right? So a lot of people emulate their gurus. So for like Robert S. Smith, Jack Welch is a guru of Robert S. Smith, and so Jack Welch was kind of like a lot of people's gurus coming out of the 90s, going into the 2000s. The former chairman and president of GE, and he had a lot of ideas about what it took to be a strong executive leader. But when I tried to implement some of his ideas as a leader myself, I realized there was some inherent toxicity in some of his concepts, and so I had to abandon that because it didn't really work for my brand of leadership. I more kind of gravitated towards where John C. Maxwell is, because he talks about servant leadership. And
Yes.
so, and then Donald O. Clifton, who talks about positive psychology, I gravitated towards that style of leadership. So basically, my acolytes were more people who were talking about leading in a very different way. And as a diverse professional and leader myself, I knew that I couldn't get away with the same things that people who are traditionally in positions of power get away with.
Mm-hmm.
If I was gonna be successful, I was gonna have to lead in a whole different way, and that was embracing positive psychology, bringing out the unique strengths of each person. That was going to be servant leadership in terms of reorienting the hierarchy and make sure that the business served the people, not the other way around. And then that evolved to Jedi leadership, which is basically, okay,
Mm-hmm.
now we're not talking about just employees, but we're talking about customers, communities, and the environment as key stakeholders that we want to also improve outcomes for. Everybody can win when we lead as Jedi leaders in terms of those outcomes for more stakeholders. We don't have to be so narrowly focused on profits for the few. We can
Right.
actually expand outcomes for the many. When we take care of our employees as the first point of call, that takes care of everybody else and a whole ecosystem of stakeholders. But
Mm-hmm.
first port of call is to take care of employees. And what we've been seeing for the last 20 years from Gallup is that employee engagement and productivity rates have been going down, steadily down, or holding at around 15% globally and 34% in the US. And so 34% of people who work every day are engaged with their work. That's like criminal.
That's why we had the quiet quitting, so to speak, in 2020, I guess you would say.
Yeah,
People
exactly.
were just really fed up and just like, you know what, I'm done with this. And
Yeah,
when they had some time to really sit at home and understand like what it is that they were doing, most people leave their work because they hate
yeah,
their bosses.
yeah.
It's
Well, that's one of my main talks is people don't leave companies, they leave managers.
They
And
leave managers. It's
yeah,
like I like the work. Even like the customers. It's the people who are the leaders. So in terms of other leader examples, I guess you would say, what do you feel about former President Barack Obama? How was his leadership style?
I think Barack Obama was exemplary from a values perspective. I mean, I
Mhm,
think no one has ever upheld you talk about the values of the Constitution and the values of America and an example for
mm,
America. I mean, I think that on those levels, he scores the highest level of points. I
mhm,
think that from first term to second term, he grew a lot. I'm glad he got a second term
mhm,
because his first term was he tried to do he had a If you read his book, his agenda was too big. He had too much he was trying to do
Too
the first
much.
term.
Yeah,
And
be
I
as
feel
good
the
at it
same way.
being
The first time I was a GM in Indonesia, I had my agenda was too big. I wanted to do everything because I finally got this position of power that I wanted to actually do so much to help people. But I realized that, I had to dial things down, make the main thing the main thing, make sure people not only
Mhm,
felt you have to go when you're leading change, you have to make sure people feel the actual impact of the transformation before you move on to the next thing. And so this is where
mhm,
leaders actually miss a lot is they're so focused on saying they check the box on the thing, they don't wait until the impact hits the people, right? So even
mhm,
for like President Joe Biden with the student debt relief, let's make sure that let's make sure it's hitting the people who need it the most. Then let them tell the story about how this has impacted their lives. Then everyone will believe it actually happened. Versus you saying, "Oh, look at how many millions of billions of debt have been actually forgiven." But when I talk to students, college students, they're like, "Oh, that didn't relate to me. I didn't get approval. I didn't get." So it's like there's a disconnect between what's being said and what people are feeling, and that is where I think a lot of leaders, not just Barack or anybody else, have to evolve. You have to basically prioritize very, very well, make the main thing the main thing, and focus
mhm.
on impact and outcomes, which is where my approach to Jedi leadership is very different than a lot of other DEI practitioners. It's not about the anti-bias training. It's not about the rah-rah speeches. It's not about the making people have to declare shame for the legacy of their ancestors. It's about defining very, very clear outcomes for fairness, opportunity to participate, innovation, and engagement, and then doing the really hard work to make sure that's fully embedded in the company's principles, priorities, practices, and processes.
So in terms of the JEDI, Jedi,
Yeah,
Justice, Equity, Diversity, where did that come from? That whole, I
yeah,
guess you say the acronym. That's like the acronym that you're owning. That's
right.
the main thing.
So I
When
first
did
heard, yeah.
mhm. When was it
I,
first kind of like came to fruition in your mind? Like, okay, this is what
Well,
we
I wasn't the inventor of this. It's a gentleman, a Brazilian gentleman who works in the agricultural services industry named Marcelo Bonta, first coined the term Jedi leadership. And there's been a number of organizations, the Jedi OAC Collective, who also embrace it, that are also the natural foods and environmental industries. And so, but that was not coming into the mainstream. So I wanted to help bring Jedi into the mainstream because I felt like, okay, DEI without the J, right? What is DEI
Mhm,
with the J? Well, if you have, let's say, okay, we accept differences into our culture, and we are inclusive of these differences, and we're working on making sure we have opportunity to participate. But bad actors in our system consistently don't get punished, and we allow
mhm,
this the CEO pay gap to persist, which is fundamentally unfair, and we don't take care of the health and wellness of our employees. Without the J, in my
mhm.
opinion, and in the opinion of a lot of other people, the rest of DEI collapses.
I get it. I love it. That is it. Now, this particular book, I would say, just looking at it, and I've had this one and the other one as well, they're like textbooks. They are what I would say. This is what I call like the overachiever of. There was another
Mm.
person that went to FAMU. He's a movie director. I can't think his name off the top of my head. He just stomped the yard and all of that.
Oh yeah, 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 yeah,
Um,
yeah.
I can't think of it. But anyway, those are that right there, because this right here is a whole nother level. So
Mm.
tell us a little bit about your experience at the HBCU, and then you're traveling all over the world, and now you're
Right,
coming back and you're doing your global tour. So kind of tell us
right,
how where you came from, because you
right.
know, where you started, and then how you went to the HBCU, and then now you're overseas and doing all the other stuff.
Well, I went to like a lot of people who went to HBCUs. I actually spent my entire life going to all white schools, right? So
Mhm.
basically, what's funny about an HBCU is when you all get there freshman year, you were the only one or two of you at your high school, junior high school, elementary school, and now you decided to matriculate to an all black school, and so it's very funny because when you go to all white school, you define your identity as one way, but when you go to all black school, you have to figure out who
That's
you
what I
actually
yeah,
are.
yeah, yes,
Like,
yes.
who
That's
am
what I
I? Like who am I? And so, you go through all these stages. Like, you go through the angry black person stage, you go through the revolutionary stage, you start reading the autobiography of Malcolm X and finding out about your culture, reading about Marcus Garvey and Booker T. Washington. You start unlearning a lot of stuff you learned in high school, junior high school, and learning really a lot more about your culture, appreciating your
Mhm.
culture, and having that that confidence. There's no better womb of safety than going to an HBCU if you are
Yeah,
a young African American,
yeah,
because you're everywhere you look, you can just be yourself. And so
yeah,
it's like such a safe space to grow up and learn. Great educators, passionate about education, and
and
so
their
that really set me
expectations
off.
and their expectations of you are very high.
Extremely high. I mean, at
You
Florida A&M, Florida A&M does not mess around. Florida A&M
right,
is like the Marine. Our School of Business and Industry is called the Marines of business schools for
ooh,
a
I know
reason.
that's right.
And
I
so
know
anybody who
that's
comes through SBI is serious. Like, you meet an SBI out in the world, that person is going to be doing something really beneficial and serious out in the world. So it's a
yeah,
legacy that you have to uphold. And
mhm,
then I
yeah,
went, my career took me around the world. So, basically I spent, over 15 years of my career living in places like Brazil, Turkey, and Indonesia, and also traveling the world. I've been to over 50 countries as
so,
well
yeah.
in my travels.
And you were
And
like the one of the youngest,
yeah,
executives or leaders in those companies. So every time you would
yeah,
go, not only were you like one of the few African Americans, but one of the youngest African
exactly.
Americans
I
as
had to deal with
well.
ageism and racism at the same time. So it's
Right.
like, you're not supposed to be here because you're too young. You're not supposed to be here because you're too brown. Like, both of those two things were true for me for a
Mhm.
lot of my career. Um, but I learned how to be accepted in a lot of different cultures, and it's about embracing other people. So
Mhm.
inclusion is about it's not about you. Like, you don't want to be the ugly American. I never wanted to be the ugly American. And so you basically downweight your Americanness, and you start learning about the other culture. You start reading about their history. You start trying to understand what makes them who they are. And then you can relate and interact, which is why it's such a sin in America that we're trying to get rid of our history, because how are we supposed to work together and meld
Right.
together if people are forgetting about a big part of our history that makes us
Mhm.
who we are and defines kind of some of the systems that we're operating within today. You have to acknowledge it in order for you to move on from it. But if you
Mhm.
don't acknowledge, if you can't erase it. I
Right.
mean, I think Germany is the best example in the world for how to handle, a tragic past and a traumatic past and what you did. I mean, if you read about what Germany did after the Holocaust, it is a case study in how a nation can reconcile with its really, really bad past. And so that's
Mhm.
just an example of that. But coming back full circle, coming back to the U.S., I was in overseas from 2012 to 2020. Coming back to the U.S. in the midst of all the pandemic, and also the season of social justice protests.
Yeah.
Um,
It was the
you
first time
know,
I ever protested personally to myself in 2020. I mean, I
right,
grew up in the
right,
'60s, but I was too young to really protest. It was the
right,
first time
right.
I ever marched. It was like and I'm marching I'm marching with a mask on, so it was very
Exactly, exactly.
very very different.
And so for me, it's like, okay, so I my mission, my why, my purpose is to inspire more people to reject the antiquated way of leadership and embrace modern leadership, which is servant leadership, onto Jedi leadership. And so I
Mhm.
realized that a book is one way to do that, but I,
Mhm.
I have to
Mhm.
go out and reach and talk to the people. Basically reach out, and I'm really, one of my key skill sets is training and facilitation. Pam, I'm really good in a room with people, workshopping and getting people to really have revelations. And so I wanted to launch this series of events that are going on around the world that relate to servant leadership, because servant leadership is the baseline foundation for Jedi leadership. And I'll go through do a Jedi leadership series, later on. But I want to do this, all over the world, and bring leaders along this journey and show you that you don't have to be an egotistical boss to be successful in the modern work environment.
Thank you. That is the whole part. It's like you're not a they don't act like a leader, they act like a king. And then all the other people are their servants where they really should
Yeah.
be the servant to their employees. They're really making
Mhm,
that. So talk about your tour. It's
mhm.
starting in 2024 and you're going to different cities. I want people to go to Omarlharris.com kind of know a little bit about the tour. Obviously, you can get the books and book them to speak
Right.
and all that kind of thing, but talk about the cities that you're going to be traveling to.
So I've had to deviate the tour a little bit, Pam, from what we've earlier talked about because of some personal issues here in Charlotte. But ultimately, the idea is to go to Dubai,
Mhm.
London, Accra in Ghana, Johannesburg, Sao Paulo, and Manila.
Yeah.
And in those six cities, basically 50 to 75 leaders in each city for 2 to 3
Mhm.
days, depending on the experience that you want. The 2 day experience is kind of the baseline experience, and the 3 day is the VIP. And we'll be talking about everything leadership. What I say is that
Mhm.
basically for corporate leaders, if you want to rapidly upskill your managerial core, send them to this 2 or 3 day retreat. They will come back transformed. And so
Mhm.
that's my guarantee to my business customers who want to send 5 to 7 or 8 different attendees from their company, their top, basically the most talented leaders, people they believe in who are going to be the leaders of the future. That's who I want coming to my
Ah, yeah.
program,
Yeah.
because they're going to come back in and they're going to be the change leaders that are going to transform the standard of leadership internally, moving forward in the organization. And they'll be the new standard bearers. And so that's kind of the idea of the series. I'm not really offering it B2C. I'm offering it B2B. Different corporations will send their top talents, and then we'll
Right.
have like maybe 4 or 5 different companies represented in that 50 to 75 people, and then we'll have this journey that we go on for 2 to 3 days. That's going to be fully unique, revolutionary experience, and I'm looking forward to bringing the same thing to the U.S.
It's kind of like train the trainer in a way.
Exactly, in a way,
You're
yeah,
training the train. You're not like trying to get all of the people to understand the principles, but the actual leaders to understand the principles, and then they actually change their organizations with that and that kind of
exactly.
thing. So that the this particular book right here, it's broken into part one, discovering definition of why the Jedi leader. We kind of talked a little bit about that and the definitions, but we kind of go into what you were talking about, the principle, the priority, the processes, and the practices. I
Hmm.
like a lot of P's. I got a bunch of P's in my name as well. But I like the this is the third part here of really you talk about karate versus judo. And it's you kind of playing the words a little bit about Jedi and the whole martial arts and that kind of thing, but kind of like explain that karate versus judo.
Right. So this is something that I came up with because I was observing the way that the work was being done after 2020. I was observing the people who were doing the work. So what people don't know is that when 2020 hit, there were not enough professionals operating in the space who knew how to really make DEI flourish within a corporation, and also
Right.
were senior enough within an organization to make things, who had the influence to make things happen. So what happens is you have this influx of people from academia, from consultants coming in or creating consultancies to serve this need, where no one had even defined what the role was and no one had defined what the outcomes were. So what happens in a situation like that is you end up doing a lot of hand-to-hand combat, which is karate. Karate is hand-to-hand combat. Karate means open hand.
Mhm.
You're fighting
Mhm.
each other. So
Mhm.
these external forces are coming in and they're fighting the organization, right? And they're trying to gain traction through fighting. And so everything is a fight. Everything's a battle. Like the anti-bias training is a fight, and everything is a fight. And what happens when you're fighting is you're going to get hit back. What is what we see now with the anti-DEI backlash, which is
Right.
you're going to hit, you're going to get hit.
Mhm.
Judo is far more strategic because judo, as a martial art, is the martial art of using your opponent's inertia against them to disable them. And so you're not fighting in judo. You're actually seeing where they're going, the direction of travel, and you're just taking them there a little bit faster,
Mhm.
like throwing someone over
Mhm.
your shoulder. And so
Mhm.
that what that looks like in a corporation is, where are look at the priorities of the company right now. Where can we anchor our Jedi work to that's going to already being funded, that's already important, that's already a priority, and how can we bank this in there? You know,
Mhm.
that's a
Mhm.
lot more successful. It's sort of like how medicine is in capsules. If
Mhm.
you had to take the little granules, they would taste horrible. People wouldn't take the medicine. But the fact that it's in a capsule that makes it easy to swallow, that's why we take these pills. And so judo it's like a pill, it's a delivery system for transformation.
I love
It's
that.
it's it's a lot more strategic, it's a lot more subtle. People may not even know what you're doing, but you're going to get a lot further with that approach than by saying, listen, hey, I declare hand-to-hand combat with you and we're going to do battle. That rarely works when it comes to business transformation. You don't want to start off on a point of of trying to get things done by saying, listen, let's draw lines in the sand. I'm on this side, you're on that side, and I'm going to fight you. I'm going to beat you into submission, which is where a
Mm,
lot of the work felt like in the first couple of years of since 2020. Now we have to evolve. DEI is not dead; it just has to transform, and that's why this book is the most timely book on the subject that you can read right now. It's unlike
mm,
anything else you're going to read in the space, and it is from an insider's perspective. So I make sure I say on the cover, the insider's perspective, because
right.
I'm not a theoretician. I'm not an academician. I'm not coming from a theoretical perspective. I did this. I lived this in my career, and that's
In other
why
countries.
you should
Mhm,
get the book.
mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's from other countries too, because one of the things is
exactly.
that from all the different nations that you were in and having to learn the culture and actually doing the work versus a theory of that. I will say though, the book does read like a textbook from the standpoint that the definitions are in there, the illustrations, the graphs. I mean, those kind of things, that part right there. But you could see why you would have to do a workshop because you're actually having people doing the work and actually understanding that kind of thing. This right here, I want to say how long, because this is kind of like the playbook, and then you had the other one. How long does it something like this take you to write?
I didn't even want to write the book, Pam. I didn't want to write it. I was forced to write. I was forced to write it because I was like,
Because it's
I
in your
have to.
head. It's in your head. It was like
I have
this
to
is
weigh in. I have to weigh in. I was doing these panels and I was being asked to do this work that was not actually meaningful. And I was like, no, I need to draw a line in the sand and say, listen, this is where I'm at. This is the work that I want to do as it relates to this. If I'm not doing it this way, I don't want to do it at all. And for me, I'm a leadership expert. I'm not solely focused on DEI. So for
right.
me, like I need to make sure
Exactly.
people know where I stand and I can move on to other stuff because that's
Mhm.
basically I got more books to write. I got other things. I'm getting ready to work on the servant leaders playbook. So I'm going back to
Ah,
servant leadership and I'm working on that
yeah,
one as my next title. So this
yeah.
book took a year, to a year and some months to write and publish.
It's excellent. It
You
really
know,
is. It
I
really
designed
is.
all the graphics myself on Canva. Everything, that's me.
Mhm.
I did all that. I did every
Oh,
graphic in the book myself.
yeah.
Yeah, everything is really like from my heart and soul. I put everything I had related
Mhm.
to this topic into that book. And so I think people, I mean, right now I've got 4.5 star reviews on Amazon. So people are really feeling it. I think
Wow.
it's getting the right reaction. I've gotten a Kirkus star. It's going to be the Kirkus Indie Book of the Month in April, which is
Yes.
huge.
Yes.
And
Kirkus been
so
around, like, I don't
yeah,
know, over 100 almost 100 years, you know what I'm saying? So that's, like,
yeah,
really major. I like this
yeah,
one part that talks about mental renewal and the impact of
right,
meditation because you're even
right.
talking about that as well, and so
Hmm.
it's not just all the things within the company, but you even talk about Zen, Buddhism,
Hmm.
and other practices as well. Because living in different countries, you had to understand their culture as well. And so I liked how
100%.
you had to bring that in there as well. And so I like the time that the things that you put in here about the spiritual renewal and work life integration. I mean, like you said, one of the things that is different than all the other books because it gives that holistic view. I mean, some of the leaders you like, John Hope Bryan. So say for instance, he has a
Hmm.
leadership
Hmm.
style, and then versus say, Tiffany R. Warren, that kind
Hmm.
of thing. So
Hmm.
it's like it's a combination, but then it's where you're from a global perspective and
Hmm.
working with major corporations. So
Yeah,
those are like
yeah.
the main things. The other part too, I like where you talk about Jedi opportunities, Jedi threats. Obviously we're doing like the SWAT with that as well.
Hmm.
But
Hmm.
this right, if you didn't write any other books, this one right here was enough. I'm like, oh my God, you got more books to write. So it is no wonder what Kirkus definitely said for sure that you're
Hmm.
going to be one of the top books in April. So that we have a release out there on that as well. So I want to make sure that people go to Amazon. I have all the books on the link so they can actually buy it on the Amazon link as
Thank
well.
you.
There was another book. Was it your first book that talked about 90 days? I'm not sure if it
Oh
was.
yeah, the first 90 days. I have
Yeah.
some ebooks that are free that I have out there as well that you can get that are just really like simple, short, useful,
Mhm. Mhm.
books to help you like with certain aspects like
Yeah.
building trust or like the first 90 days going to a job or even a book that I
That's
call
important.
hiring the right whom, which is about a methodology for sourcing the right behaviors for your team versus worrying about pedigree or experience or where the people come from. Behavioral interviewing style is much more crucial to getting the right, what I call team DNA, than just looking at someone's references and their experience. Because what I found in my career is that past experience is rarely a predictor of future or current
Mm,
performance. So what someone did in a previous environment does not necessarily mean they're going to be doing the same thing for you. So what's better to know is their behaviors, their degree of work ethic, their degree of optimism, their degree of passion for the work they do, and how mature they are. That's far more important to assess, in addition to their skills and experience, than just overweighting skills and experience and how well someone interviews, right? Because a lot of
yes.
time people can interview really, really well, then you get them on your team and they're like, oh my God, they're disasters. So
Yeah, they
the
could be an actor. They could
yeah,
just be really good at acting and then just be terrible in terms of like a work ethic, right? So it's
look at
like, oh my
TikTok. We had a lot of actors and comedians in the world we didn't know about. So like, there's a lot of them out there. So
It
so
is. It has
so
made it a
yeah.
whole new thing. It's a lot of people that are virtual. Everybody's doing
Yeah.
the remote work. And my daughter in particular, she has never met her team in person. It's always been remote.
Mm,
She works for an international company, interviewed on Zoom. They sent her a laptop. It was like, that's her, that is her work world. And she's just been
right.
out a few years. I was like, wow, how does that impact things? Because
Yeah, it's so
you
different.
have you have a a whole generation, I would say, that came out of school that really at this point it's normal to not interact in person.
Right. Right,
It's like,
right.
oh my
And,
God.
and leadership in that
What is
environment is
that?
like, how do you lead in that environment where you don't even have a personal connection with the people? And so, I've been talking to a lot of my coaching clients about kind of the three modes of leadership. You'll see an article coming out about this pretty soon
Mm,
on LinkedIn, but like three modes, right? So you have leader mode, which is when you're in the mode of inspiring and motivating. You
mhm,
have coach mode when you're in the mode of developing and calibrating, and you have manager mode, which you're in the mode of directing and kind of monitoring, right? So you have to know with each person on your team which mode you need to be in at which time. Some people on the team need a manager. They need someone who's going to tell them what to do and monitor their progress. Some people need a coach. Some people need to be refined, the rough edges smoothed out, and they need to be developed in terms of what they're really, really good at. And some people need leadership, which is listen, I'm going to inspire you. I'm going to motivate you. I'm going to push you. But I'm not going to monitor you. I'm going to give you plenty of room to grow and to fail and develop. And so it's kind of knowing which mode you have to occupy when, and that's really important for virtual leadership because you got to figure out where people are at, and
yeah.
if they're not delivering virtually, then you have to figure out what mode to switch into and help them
Ooh,
get on the same page.
leadership is important. It really is. That is everything. That
Yeah.
is everything. So I want people to read the blog and follow you on LinkedIn because you're one of the top voices on LinkedIn. So I want people to
Yep.
make sure that they follow all of the newsletters and things and the articles that you put there as well. And then also to book you to speak. Your speaking reel is right on Omar L. Harris, and obviously they can connect with you there. And then obviously when you're doing the global tour this year, but then also connect with you so you can do the United States tour the following year after that. So making sure that you're
Mhm.
doing that as well. And then just, keep up with you. Do you your preferred way, your preferred social media is which one? You like
LinkedIn.
LinkedIn?
Yeah.
Yeah, of
Yeah,
course.
so that's why I'm one of the most active. Instagram, I don't do as much on Instagram, but LinkedIn is more. If you want to know what's happening in any given day, I think last night I went on a binge. I posted like 15 times, something like that. So I went a little crazy last night. But yeah,
Yeah, we had
yeah,
little things that were triggers, but yeah, LinkedIn is I call it. It's a thought leader's favorite
yeah,
platform, and so
yeah,
that is
yeah.
really where we can really share and that kind of thing. So, Omar,
Mhm.
thank you so much for joining us today. The book
Thank you,
is
Pam.
excellent. I can't wait for more to come out, and I think if I can mention it, you're doing these type of books with your nonfiction, but you're also working on some film scripts as well.
Yeah, my sister and I are a screenwriting duo. We're working on TV shows, film. We got a lot going on in that space as well. Trying to adapt my first novel into a movie or TV
There you
series.
There you
Uh,
go. I wanted you
so
to mention that.
yeah,
Yes, because
yeah,
you're
yeah.
multi-dimensional. So I wanted you to say that as well. It's not just all
Thank
these
you.
kind of textbook like, but you've got some creative stuff too, and your sister as
Sure
well.
do.
She's
Yeah,
in
yeah.
that industry as well, and entertainment
100%.
industry. So thank you all so much for for doing all the books and doing the work and keeping it going.
Thank
Okay.
you very much.
All right. Thank you. Yep, that is Omar L. Harris. Please make sure that you get the book. It is amazing. Book him to speak. He's been in Speakers Magazine, so that you can see him here as well. So you can go there as well, speakersmagazine.com, and watch his speaker reels and all that kind of stuff. So with that, I am Pam Perry, and thank you for joining us. And make sure that Pam Perry's picks, that you share these books out, share the stream, subscribe, and all those things. So I will